Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. Very glad to welcome you today for this session on fifth generation purchasing. My name is Hervé Lejean. I'm a professor at EIPM on innovation, and I'm also the director of the Value Creation Observatory. So this is our research arm at EIPM. So today, particularly happy to have this session where I'm going to present to you the content of our book, Fifth Generation Purchasing, When Pace Meets Power. So this is a book that's presenting 6 work modes that are based on the pace of change on the demand side, and the customer, the internal stakeholders, so the demand side, and the pace of change on the supply side. And the book is not just a description of these modes, but it's full of interviews with leading CPOs that have been, sharing their experience on each of these work modes. And there's also some tools and a lot of content that I'm sure will, really be of interest for many of you. So why did we call this fifth generation purchasing? So the real source of this title is in fact a book dating back to the mid-90s, and this was fifth generation R&D, and this was announcing that R&D was more and more depending on external source of innovation. And I thought that would be a very interesting parallel to be made today on this one. So nothing to do with telecommunications. It's really about the inspiration from this book on R&D. Going quickly, the world of procurement once was a world of entrepreneur. It was a world where the founder of the company was selling the product of the company and buying on the same market the supply needed for the business. It's suddenly during the late part of the 19th century that we saw some of the very big companies coming into the picture. This was a race to scale, and at that time we had a focus on standardization and a first globalization that led to the birth of purchasing. And it's really interesting to look at some of the early books on purchasing, because you will discover a lot about the first stages of negotiation with some of the big suppliers that were coming into the picture of these companies, but also a lot about total cost of ownership and protecting the interest of the business. There was a long period in the 20th century where companies were vertically integrated. Why? Because there was a lot of trade barriers back, with the First World War and with the economic crisis of the 30s. Everybody was looking within the territory and creating industries from beginning to end within a single company. Think of Ford and the Ford T, the car manufacturer. He was owning some rubber plant plantations, and everything to manufacture a car was done under the same roof. Markets have been opening up over time. Companies have slowly started to buy more and more, but really this was from after the oil crisis that we experienced in the 70s, that we started to see the process of globalization taking place. This meant global competition. This meant, sourcing products from all around the world. But this also meant outsourcing some of the tail activities in order to be able to invest in developing business in other parts of the world. So this is really very pregnant in some companies in terms of purchasing practice, rationalizing the supply base, getting savings by consolidating activities, risk management, and in some occasion, moving into some of the collaboration in order to deliver further benefits. But then we've been slicing and dicing, cutting into pieces this very long value chain. And each of these blocks, the buyer was trying to turn them into a commodity. And the response over the past 10 years has been to harness a number of trends related to digitalization, related to new technologies, and to try to innovate out of the commodity trap, not being anymore selling a commodity, but trying to bring some new technology on the top. And putting information on top of service and on top of products is something, a way that even helps companies to change places within a value chain. And we start more and more to see dynamic ecosystems where company can, at the same time, they can, compete, collaborate, they can be a client, suppliers of each other. So more complexity into the structure of industries. In that context, procurement is more and more expected to bring some innovation and to adopt a business mindset so it can support the further transformation of companies. It's a time of distant capabilities because we need more and more to get access to new know-how, new skills coming from other industry, and to bring that into our existing industry. Leveraging, the power of digital transformation, moving into circular economy, all this require to look at the market in different ways. So that's really about the world of fifth generation. This is a world where we need to combine pace and power, the ability on everything we do to reach scale, to consolidate, to build synergies across the business so we can get access to one supplier or two suppliers that can deliver everything, can still work. But at the same time, we now need to use pace. We need to work in sync with the business and work in sync with the supply market in order to, deliver not just the synergies, but more benefits and more value. We need to accelerate and anticipate. The more actually we want to accelerate, the more we want to anticipate. And the more we want to anticipate, we need to accelerate. We don't have extensive resources. So if we want to spend more time, to look at what's happening in certain fields, this means that we need to spend less time in certain projects and certain areas, work closely with suppliers to, deliver some of these benefits. And we need to both explore and exploit opportunities. We need to build relationship with some suppliers, and over the years, make sure we work together in order to get, improvements, to get further opportunities to create costs down. That's exploiting opportunities. But at the same time, we need to prepare tomorrow. We need to prepare the foundations in terms of value chain that will deliver, future products for the business. So that's a lot of things that we need to think of, and we need to bring to reality inside the company that we are working for. So let me go into the 6 mode. So on the y-axis, you've got the speed of change on the demand side. So final customer, how fast do they want some new solutions? The internal stakeholder, how often do they need to bring new sources of value from outside in order to innovate for the final client? That's the y-axis. The x-axis is about the speed of change on the supply side. Do we have a fairly stable base of supplier that's not shifting? Or do we have deep into the value chain a lot of changes that we need to take into account in order to, provide the right recommendations to the business so we can move, confidently into the future? And if we look at this create this picture with 6 work modes. Here, bottom left, tactical buying. The world is not changing too much. We have a stable base of goods, services we need to bring inside the organization. We simply need to be very efficient in getting access to these goods and services. At the other end of the spectrum, in the exploration stage, well, here, the demand is changing fast, the supply is changing fast, there's novelty coming in. So we need to be able to help the business prepare the future and be part of teams that are exploring what could work in order to deliver something solid for the future. Let's look at other extremes. Here we've got the Agile Advisor. The Agile Advisor is someone very close to the business, spending a lot of the time with the internal stakeholders and able to go to existing supplier, not just to source what we already use, but sometimes also gain access to some innovative product from the existing supplier or supplier very similar to the one we have today. So working in sync with a demanding business, but leveraging from a rather stable supply base, whatever we need to move into the future. At the other side of the spectrum, we've got the competence center. So here, maybe we have a situation like access to raw materials. So the requirements might not be evolving significantly. We might be, buying some volumes of raw materials, but deep into the value chain, deep into the network of suppliers, we've got a lot of turmoil. There's new players, new industry that are starting to come in, that are taking the volumes, drying up the capacity. There are changes, there's issues of sustainability, and so on and so on. And we need people who are able to go deep into the supply network, these ecosystems, and being able to understand the situation and educate the rest of the organization on the challenge the company is facing and on what is the best way to handle that. Very often, people that have been facing issue during the COVID period have not been looking at immediate suppliers. That was important, that was done, but sometimes they've been quite deep into the supply chain to help solve some of the issues. So that's typically the competence center. What else? Here, we've got collaboration and alliance, typically when one company is depending on another company, a supplier, for its future. The two companies are co-evolving into the future, and we need to manage this relationship so the two companies are moving into what's happening into the next years at the same pace, exchanging their roadmap and being able to come up with new solutions that are feeding each business. And of course, fairly classic consolidation, creating synergies across business units, across factories in order to have one or two suppliers that can offer bigger volume at a better price while satisfying the user. I can see a question from Omar. Hey, hola, Omar. Nice to see you back with us today. So you've got a question about cost model to define the cost that it takes the supplier to make a part plus a profit previously agreed. What's my opinion? Are we going to get a new area where negotiation won't be any more longer needed? Hola, that's opening a lot of discussions. Well, I think that more and more new technology are going to be used in terms of a cost modeling. And in some industries where there's big volume, there will be a lot of incentive of, leveraging some of the parametric technologies, the use of artificial intelligence that will be looking at a lot of data about product price. There will be ways of using machine learning also for costing, and a lot of it is going to be used in order to get more and more accurate in terms of these elements. But depending on whether this is a situation of mutual dependence, like you experience in the automotive sector, or if this is a situation of full dependence, the implications will be very different. As long as there will be dependencies, as long as the relationship in terms of the strength of negotiation on the two sides won't be equal, then negotiation will still be there and will still be essential. And this is only going to be applicable to certain type of products and goods, and it might not be something we will see everywhere. And probably a lot of the business model into the future will be more and more based on this data, on consuming whatever you use, and being able to pay only for what you use because of the data generated that will be aligned with some of the cost modeling. Okay, so that was a little bit of a side view on how things will be played from that perspective. So I hope now you start to get a good understanding of the picture and what we've been looking at in terms of the book and what we've set up. So let me describe each of the modes rapidly, and then we can have some exchange, and maybe I can open a few more slides to to go a bit deeper. So the tactical buying. So tactical buying doesn't mean it's easy to buy. This is really an area where we need to simplify, and simplify requires to face complexity, and requires to transform that complexity into something that's easy to implement. We need to gain efficiency here, and there's a lot of opportunities by harnessing the power of automation, of platforms, of aggregators, some of the new solutions that can help us and help the user get access to what they want rapidly inside an organization. Here, we need to act as an architect for the new solutions. We need some time to shape the evolution of some of our suppliers so they cover the maximum of our needs, and they gain access to extra companies, and they can act as an intermediary to provide us with some of the full solution. And in other circumstances, we're actually going to do the contrary. Maybe we're going to take advantage of disintermediation. We are going to take one player out of the picture. So let me give you an example. Some companies have been for many, many years depending on recruitment agency for their recruitment. But now, when you look at some of the solutions that are provided by companies like LinkedIn and others, well, actually, they have a very comprehensive solutions that you can put back into the hand of people who are working for HR in some corporation, and eliminate, the role of the intermediary, which was the recruitment agency. So that's another solution about moving tactical, giving to people inside the company access to some of these platforms so they can do the work by themselves. And in some occasion, what we're going to do is somehow outsource some of the activities within a segment to one company who's going to be an integrator for us, and who's going to be able to combine a lot of the different needs into a complete offering, with some of them being purely commodities and some of them being more advanced products. So for instance, if you're looking at some of the promotion items in the cosmetic world, well, maybe that's the best solution. They can offer you opportunities to get access to standard product for promotion, but also allow you to get some personalized item by doing some of the sourcing for you. So tactical buying doesn't mean it's simple. It simply means that you need to implement a solution that's going to cover a big chunk of needs in a very efficient way, while delivering superb value to the end user. Now, let's go to the consolidation. This is somehow something we know very well. This is the case of speaking the same language to all the stakeholders within all the business units, the countries, the factories, all of the sites of the company. And from that, being able to find a common denominator. We are here to create a common denominator across the business. And making strong financial analysis in terms of having common needs that can be supported by a smaller set of suppliers, so reducing the supplier base. Here, we need to think about what we do, and this is about creating mutual understanding with the supplier, because of the volume they're gaining. They will be much more important. We will be more dependent on them into the future. And we need to build collaboration, to build the foundation for future collaboration. And we need to control our strengths, because it's not about what we get the first year we start to do this, but it's all about what we're going to be able to bring into the future development that we will be able to deliver together. So that's the consolidation mode. In some ways, this is what we are used to in many organizations. Collaboration and alliances. So this is really a work mode that we need to implement, where we've got this kind of codependencies between two companies, between our company and a supplier. It's simple. If one company grows, the other company grows, then we're growing together, and we need to manage that growth together. We need to make the most of this growth together. We need to work in such a way that we can maximize the size of the pie we can together create for the future. We need to partner with very few companies here. It's not about having many of them and making sure that in every single category, everybody's got his tragic metric and says, oh, me too, I've got my strategic supplier. No, 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 that's very few of these that we're going to have across business. And what's important here, it's not so much, I mean, it's important, of course, but it's not just about, how important we are for that company in terms of volumes and in terms of profitability. And it's not just about, an overall view about the quality of the relationship. When we have such companies on which the future of one company is depending on, we need to treat them as an extension of our own organization. We need to recognize people. We need to celebrate success across companies. We need to make sure that the best people working for the supplier are actually working for us. Can you imagine if you were sure that, the best, most successful people would be from all of your suppliers working for you? This would be having a tremendous impact. What are we doing to attract these people? What are we doing to make sure they're working for us and not for the competition? So that's the kind of mindset we need to bring. It's a people business, and it's really about getting that degree of engagement from the supplier side. Agile advisor. So we're here, we've got all these stakeholders, maybe they're in marketing and sales, and depending on the country, they want to have some new solutions to advertise in social media, and this is different from one place to another, and there's novelty coming into the picture all the time. And we have a number of suppliers we can go, and this supplier, they've got quite a lot of solutions that they're developing on an ongoing basis. So the first point, that's really absolutely essential is to know our suppliers. Knowing our suppliers doesn't mean we just know what they deliver to us today and what's their level of performance on what they deliver today, but that we really know all the other solutions capabilities they could deliver potentially to us. So we might feed, into some of these emerging needs. I've been working a few years ago with a company who was in the food business, and for their supplier of production equipment, they actually have a database where they keep track of all the technology and know-how of their suppliers. So whenever there's a new project that needs to assemble a number of technology, they can quickly pull the right one out of the existing supplier base instead of searching, throughout the networks. We would be able to do, all the things that they would want in terms of production equipment. And sometimes this means that we should be able to bring some of these suppliers, talk with some of the key people inside the company, executives and engineers and, people who are influencing the future, so they really understand the problem they face, so they can be prepared to work for us. At the same time, if we anticipate on a number of things, we need to be able to accelerate, okay? So if on some activities, we need to be present earlier, we need to bring supply earlier, so we've got more visibility in terms of what's going to be needed for tomorrow to be fast. In other cases, we need to work and think rapidly with the business and source new things in a collaborative mode in a small amount of time. We've been presenting some time ago some of the process for agile vendor selection. I don't know if Andressa is with us today. I think I saw her in the list of, but that's typically, the kind of approach that we can bring into the picture of the agile advisor. Someone close to the business partner, we can help sometime to really quickly package some novelty into a vendor selection process. Moving a bit further, I'm getting into the competence center. And here, the name of the game is to look beyond the obvious, is to look sometime deep into the supply chain, supplier of suppliers, or maybe a startup who's emerging, out of the blue and who's starting to play a role somewhere in the value chain. They're not exactly a tier 3, a tier 4, or a tier 2, but they're just somewhere doing a number of interesting things, and we need to pay attention to these developments. We need to understand all the threats and all the opportunities that might be coming from very deep into this supply network. Therefore, we need to map, cross-industry ecosystems and understand novelty that's emerging across this ecosystem. It's not just about looking at yesterday's Porter 5 forces, centralizing our attention, focusing our attention on the main competitors. It's really looking on a broader scale at what's happening deep into the supply network in order to, be able to anticipate what we need to recommend to the business for tomorrow. And sometimes this means that we need to be attractive. We need to make sure that some of the innovative players want to work with us. They might be in other industry. They might be focusing their attention on something different, and we need to bring them in. We also need to bring this cognitive fluidity inside the company. For instance, in some food company, when you need to get access to some of the raw material that's going into, I don't know, let me take a sausage, and you want to buy, the skin of the sausage. I mean, the skin of the sausage is something that's coming from a slaughterhouse that's quite deep into the value chain. And it's only a byproduct, and that can be affected by a lot of things in this market. So here, we need to be able to go deep into this supply network and educate, the different decision-making bodies inside the organization about the trends that are affecting the supply markets and what is best to do into the future in order to take advantage of some of these changes while, not suffering from this evolution. So that's really about this distant world and distant supplier that we need to pay attention to here. Okay, let me go to the next one. The next one is about exploration. So I'll start to give you some examples. This is typically the case where a CPO is willing to say, I'm going to put this person and that person on project where they're not going to bring immediate savings. What they're going to be doing is they're going to work with some people from the business, and they will build the foundation for tomorrow's savings. They will work on some of the innovation projects, some of the change of technology, but tomorrow we will be ready to deliver the best economic equations, the best economic performance, but also the solution that will make a difference for the business. For instance, a lot of pharmaceutical companies have been moving from the production of medicine from chemical process to more biological process. Yeah? And that has meant that, in pharmaceutical companies, they needed to be managing this evolution. So, you can wait before there's volumes coming, or you can anticipate, and you can put people to be the single point of contact for, the stakeholders that are preparing that future, making sure we can be part of the make or buy decision that are going to be meaningful for tomorrow, and setting up in advance some of these supply chain that will make a difference. So that's really what we do here. And sometimes it's much faster. Sometimes it's about, taking someone, putting them into, let's say, a project team, an innovation team, so they can bring their expertise of getting access to market, getting access to capabilities that can contribute to build this innovation, testing them, building, a proof of concept together with the supplier, and making sure that we've got a viable solution for tomorrow. The idea here is, as much as possible, we want to fail fast and learn fast. Why fail fast and learn fast? Because this is very uncertain. We are in exploratory mode. So we need to pick some of the most promising avenue for the future rapidly. So creating, the condition to experiment with multiple solutions fast. So we fail by design, by trying many options that we can discard, and we only keep the most promising one for the future. From a relationship with supplier point of view, this means that we need to build a vision of what the ecosystem, the suppliers we're going to be working with in different parts of the world look like. This means convincing some stakeholders that we need to start doing some tests and proof of concept with some of the suppliers and work closely so we can test solutions and make sure we're building the future on solid grounds. Of course, the challenge of scaling up, that's sometimes not just requiring to work with one supplier, but sometimes to work across a network of suppliers, bringing a new technology provider into the game and getting them also to work with another supplier in order to scale some of these solutions. So, there's plenty of things we can do here. I've been working with fantastic people over the past years who've really gone far and deep, into thinking differently here. Sometimes going to keep within universities, some people, and helping them to create a supplier for the company into the future, because you need to get access very, very early stages to what is going to make a difference to capture value on your own market. Fantastic, very interesting type of development that we've got plenty of examples with, but we don't often talk about that because, well, it's quite secret for many companies. But we've got fantastic case. Okay, where are we? We're on the last slide, and just wanting to say something is we've been going through a very, volatile period of time. We've been, during the 2020 years, facing a lot of challenges. But if we think, in terms of there's different modes of working, the speed of change has changed a lot recently. Suddenly we needed to stop spending money. We needed to reduce the volume of advertising our company was doing on television, for instance, and we needed to increase the access to, protective equipment and things like that. We needed to work with suppliers who are deep into the value chain in order to make sure they would be able to restart, because we would be depending on them with our tier one supplier. So there's been a lot of this going on, and I've been able to see a lot of really interesting development. And I really hope we capture the lessons from this period, so we bring that a bit more into our ways of working into the future. Because of these emergencies, we've been able to work at different speeds across different markets, and sometimes they've been changing very fast. And I think that's something we can learn a lot into the future, and that can contribute to build, this type of future fifth generation purchasing organization. Hey, I'll pick some of the questions. Someone said consolidation and alliances. Do you mean collaboration and alliances? I'm developing a supplier council that provides 85% of the total purchase value for any product. I want to take it to the next level. I want to make sure there's very strong interaction. Yeah. So supplier council is very much something you find in the automotive industry, and sometimes I'm kind of I don't see it being picked up in others. So this is really creating this type of a format when some of the suppliers are coming to exchange on a regular basis in a non-hierarchical perspective. So the idea is to share views about the evolution of market, the evolution of industries, share some best practice, but not in a a vertical way, on something where everybody is more equal and giving views about the future. Yeah, no, I think that's very good. It will depend on the the segment. It will depend on the industry, but I agree. I mean, this is something very important we need to have. And in the council, we have no competitors. Yes, clearly. Yes. No, good point. And okay. Who else? Partnership with competitors have become one pillars of being fast with external resource. Does it have to be managed specifically and differently than suppliers? Well, yes, of course. Partnership with, we have more and more situations where we actually already have suppliers who are also competitors and who are also clients. And all of these specificities, they need to be managed. We need to manage sometimes the dependencies, because there could be some challenge, but there's also opportunities. I've seen companies that have been working with competitors, and in some ways, in one country, what they've developed together appear on the brand of one of the company, and the competitor is actually stronger in another market, and the product is appearing on the brand of this competitor in a different market. So all these relationships need to be managed, but they don't just need to be managed from a business architecture point of view of having the contract and the governance, but it's also about managing the people, making sure that we've got the right kind of team across the two companies that's bringing things forward into the future. I see. Through one of the foundation of sourcing and more in general, with anything related to finance was not to put all eggs in one basket. Well, that's something that's very common these days in terms of diversifying some of the source of provision. Yeah. So, Michel, if I understand, Hervé, all these mods can coexist in the same organization based on strategic needs. Yes, and even you can have all of these in the same segment. That's not always the case. Let me go back to the picture. Often, you might have some segment that will be maybe operating a little bit more on the right below side of the picture or on this side of the picture. But let me give you one example that's in the book where I've interviewed one of the alumni of the executive MBA. She's a brilliant lady working in Shanghai, and she's been working for a big FMCG company on e-commerce. So she was in charge of making sure that each of the brands of the business, like selling to space or something like this, they would be able to put some of their product on an e-commerce platform at a time where this was booming in China and becoming the standard in terms of selling stuff. So it's not just about the relationship with the e-commerce company, but it's also about order management, about warehousing, about social marketing, a lot of things behind, and customer service, providing feedback through chat to clients. So she was in fact managing a lot of different activities, and some of them, she was going into this consolidation mode in terms of customer service. She was working a lot to make sure that there wouldn't be too many people sitting on a bench ready to answer customers when they had a question. So right sizing, calibrating, consolidating activities from that point of view. At the same time, with some of the company was working with, she was making sure that the relationship would bring access to sources of information that would be providing insight to the marketing teams. And with some of the business, she would be really acting as an agile advisor, trying to look for a ready-made solution that encompass a number of capabilities into a same package, so they can quickly move into deploying some of their product on the e-commerce platform. While for some of them that had more maturity, she would be looking for new suppliers that can bring some little extra in terms of order management, in terms of marketing promotion and things like this. So you see, that's a situation, for instance, where one single segment, you can work in all of these different modes. Very often what we have is a sort of a pass across some of these elements. So I've been writing a case and an article about the water industry, together also with some of my MBA alumni, and they've been looking for over many years at smart meters. It started in a competence center mode, where you kind of look at what's coming up in terms of digital technologies that could be associated with a meter, because people had been talking about the possibility of doing that for some time. Then at the right time, that means moving into an exploration phase with some supplier, testing some solution. Would that work? What technology would be best to pass the information to, bring the data to the right place? What type of sensors would be best to use into these things? And then at some point, they've built a partnership with two companies, a data management company and the supplier of meters that had been moving into adding some of these sensors onto the meter for the water. And that collaboration wasn't just about creating new generation of product, it was also about selling together. Why? Because they wanted it to be a standard. If you want to get some good price, you need something that's going to be used by everybody on the market. If everybody's got their own little standard and there's, a very fragmented set of meters, then this is becoming a bit of a challenge. So they had some advance, but they wanted the solution to become the most common one. And they were helping their supplier to sell even to their competitors. And at some point, this smart meter, well, they just become a commodity because you can get them on markets and sometimes you can source them from new parts of the world. So you see, you have sometimes these paths that are going that way, or sometimes these paths that are going this way. There's a natural tendency for everything to end up as a commodity and something that can be managed, in a tactical way through the evolution, natural evolution of product and service, till someone comes in and reinvents the way of doing something, and then we go around for a new loop. And these loops can be very fast, or these loops can take many years. So yeah, there's a lot of play that you can have, and sometimes I think we need to have teams for sourcing where we leverage the abilities of a full team. So instead of giving a segment to everyone and everyone's got his own little segment, that's I'm the king of my little segment. Let's leverage the skills of people across. So some of us might be more at ease with this agile advisor mode, other be a bit more in the competence center, management of relationship, and so on and so on. And leverage the skills in the right way across. But look at a broader portfolio and make the most out of everyone. The key to move here is to start to build projects together with the business. When you operate in this quarter, when you operate in the top right part of the matrix, it's always collective success. It's always by working together with your business partner and sometimes suppliers, of course, that you're going to make a difference. So it's never procurement that wins. It's always a collective win. And this is not about just my own little, bucket where I'm putting my savings. This is about together having a project that's going to make a difference for the business. Can you tell us where the book can be bought? Yeah, that's a good question. That's on Amazon. So we've got it on six different Amazon platform. I know it's in France. After it's going to be Fred who might be able to put into the chat, the different link to get to the right Amazon. What we want to do as well is fairly soon, we want to be able to provide access to ebooks. So this will be coming, but we are discovering, the world of printing, and things can take a little bit more time than we want. But it's been a delayed launch anyway, and we're just enjoying taking it slowly, bit by bit, and supporting this launch and going into the future. Any other questions? Still happy to answer some of your questions. Strange to promote only Amazon. What about small bookshops? Well, I mean, to be honest, today we are self-publishing our book because we want to ourselves to keep control of our content. When we'll be making the book available as an ebook, this will be through another channel. But today we don't have the ability to build relationship with distribution networks for books. That's not really the core business of EIPM, I must admit. If you're interested to buy it in bulk, to distribute it to people in your company, then we'd rather do direct, and we can help you to do that. We can even for some people make sure they can write like an editor to it, and that can be distributed inside the company. So I think ourselves we're looking at more disintermediating. I understand small business and libraries need to get some support, but getting an exemplar in every single small bookstore, not sure that's going to be the easiest for us to achieve, and not sure there will be a huge amount of sales from that. Yeah, there will be many more webinars. I mean, we'll run them on a regular basis. We'll be having one about the future of competencies. So thinking of this framework and what does it mean in terms of skills and competencies. And no, sorry, Fred, you're showing me a picture, probably with the date, but I can't see it from here. Maybe you can put in the chat the date of the next webinar. That could be a direct way of doing it. Are sectors that are quicker than others to implement innovation? Young companies are ready for innovation. What is your opinion? There's a lot of things to be said here. I think the first thing is speed is very much driven by the pace of an industry. So, the speed of change in some industry is maybe to bring new product every X years, and in other it's really to bring new product every X months. So that speed and that sense of innovation is really varying from one sector to another, and sometimes this is a bit of a challenge. So bringing digital as the fifth screen inside the car is a bit difficult sometimes. We had an alumni from the MBA that was exactly doing this, helping a car manufacturer to get access to new apps and platforms inside the car in Asia in order to bring new solutions for the clients. But the company is used to think in terms of product with an horizon of 3 years, 5 years, and suddenly trying to think in terms of 3 months horizons is quite a challenge. So yeah, speed is a big thing, and speed is very different from one place to another. And some companies are very good at bringing something new to the market, but they also have big challenge to scale it up. And what we see is in the digital sector, very often you have these. So like if you take Instagram, do you know how many people were working for Instagram? There was already a global communication network before they were bought by Facebook. Any idea of the number of people working there? 14 people working in Instagram. Why? Because they're sitting on a huge amount of open source software and cloud solutions that were doing everything for them. So in some sector, you have that possibility of building on the shoulders of giants and being able to deliver, service directly to the end user, paying a fraction of the cost in terms of development of software, and being able to rely on things like, big cloud platforms in order to deliver this. But in other sector, the small company is really struggling. I've been documenting cases. If you want to bring some vending machines into a certain market for food and drinks, that's going to be located in airport and placing like that, everything connected, you need to be a specialist of hardware and software, manage relationship with the bank. And what looks like something that can be a great idea is actually something that takes quite some time, because it's not just software, there's many more other elements. And scaling up, some of these activities around vending machine is not easy. So sorry, I don't have a simple answer about speed, size of companies and innovation. The world is slightly more complex. And yeah, I mean, if you think in terms of sector, if you can take FMCG in a fast-moving goods, food or drinks, beverage, cosmetics, in many ways it would be easy to ask every buyer to come up together with supplier with one important innovation idea per year. But in other sector, you're gonna have to be much more picky. You're gonna have to think really across all the activities. Where is it that we need to put more resource for a longer time and taking people out of the day to day. So yeah, that's gonna be like this in one sector, but slightly different in another one. So there's a question about operating a global company, matrix organization, or regional layout. A combination of both, a combination of centralization, regional perspective, and business orientation. If really we're talking about a big corporation, the end state is very often that one. And we've seen in the COVID period that making sure we get access to people on the front line, we're able to bring back information for risk is taking place is absolutely essential. So there's very often a process of centralizing, starting from decentralized merger acquisition, you create a big group, you have a state of centralizing before relinquishing some of the control, allowing some of the units to innovate, allowing some of the regions to localize some of the activities. So but the best is really to have a multiple perspective and to have a network that learn from each other. I think for me that's my biggest advice. It's not about equipping all around the world in a certain organization mercenaries with an ability to bring savings. It's really creating a network of people that learn from each other, that look at the world differently, that can take that people in South America can learn from people in Australia or Europe and things like this. People in one commodity can look at another one, and broadening and creating that kind of mindset and cognitive fluidity that allow anyone to step into different situations, far away from the rigidity of implementing time and time the same vendor selection process with the same kind of constraints that we self-impose very often. So gaining that flexibility by having a multiple of perspective, but central, really strong leaders that can drive that culture, coach their people, bring things together. Is it more efficient to have separate teams doing tactical buying? That's a good question. I think, I've seen some models where some companies have been able to relinquish control of some segments to some of their shared services, where they were doing some of the sourcing activities for certain things into the shared service. That's possible in some circumstances, but it's not always, it's not always the case. It's difficult. Don't think that one segment, one mode, that's not like this. Very often it's, one segment, multiple modes, and sometimes we need to be able to shift. So for instance, working with startups, I would always recommend to set a small team a little bit apart. This could be, like a network from different people around who have the ability to, manage the onboarding of startup, for instance, or having a dedicated shared service for startup. Why? Well, part of the idea is really to protect them for the classic, procurement process and simplify things, accelerating, access for some of the business to some of these companies. So that could be a way where you wanna, set up a special entity who's going to be doing things differently. In other occasion, in very fast-moving companies, you can set up a system where at a certain point in time, you can call the whole network and you can ask someone to come and give a hand with an industry that person has been exposed to. I came into this when one of the company was starting to work with one of the platform for freelancers. well, they had someone in another segment who had been exposed to this business in the past. So, there's a sort of a systems by which that person can do some work for another category for a certain amount of time. And, that creates some of the fluidity when things are moving fast. And then other people can be put on the side, full-time, part-time, to work on a project that's slightly, different, because they're going to be acting as a single point of contact together with some of the stakeholders. So that would be my three things. In a few cases, you can create, for tactical reasons or for innovation reasons, special units that are going to be very small but managing specific situation. In other situations, you want to create that fluidity across the organization, so you can call the help of everyone for a day, 2 days, a month, 3 months, short assignments, great for learning, great to be exposed to new things. That's really good for the teams and the organization. And sometimes, having this drive, this ability in the organization to dare taking someone out of the day-to-day, savings machines and putting them in some of these longer term innovation, but that's going to build a lot of credibility with the business. That's going to build the strong foundation to deliver the future savings. So that's how would I describe the organization aspect. What is your opinion about use of sourcing counsel from experts in your team versus just doing regionally, as long as they comply with some standards and predetermined parameters? Wow, Mark, you're asking me questions, and we need to understand. I mean, for me, sourcing councils mean that you have a cross-functional group. So that means that you have a team representing the buying center that's meeting on a regular basis. So that really works well for technology, for global type of categories, where you're sourcing globally for all the units in a structured way. Now, sometime if you do things regionally, that would be typically for me the case where you've got more local for local. You might have suppliers locally that are supporting your local units, and therefore you've got a means of coordination across different purchaser across the world. So I think for me, this is really about the market setup and the industry need and the degree of heterogeneity or homogeneity along these two axes that will dictate when you can establish a sourcing council with representatives from all parts of the business in one group versus coordinating more, regional sourcing activities from a global perspective and sharing best practice, making sure that we can build on each other's knowledge. I have no clue if I answered your questions, but seeing these words, that's kind of what's come to my mind. And yes, we'll put the replay of the webinar online. I hope you enjoyed the session. What should I say? Buy the book. Well, yeah, that would be great. But come back to me. Tell me what are your problems. Tell me what the challenge you have. I started to draw this picture when a few people started to bring me problems and say, what do you think of this survey? PepsiCo is getting rid of their marketing and sales procurement team because they're too slow. Or how do we get organized to get access to IoT technology, because you need hardware, software, network. So how do we purchase all that? This was how I started to work on this and putting all that together. Daniel asking thoughts on whom should own categories, business or purchasing. Oh, well, there's a lot of options here, I would say. Where do we add value? Where do our expertise in terms of access to market, the understanding of the functioning of market, make a difference? So we only need to own whenever we're going to be having significant value on top of what the user can deliver. If the user are looking at small volumes, they've got enough knowledge, and this is going to existing suppliers, educate them, give them the tools, equip them with the ability to source by themselves. I mean, today we've got more and more solutions where we can relinquish control, set the boundary conditions, provide the playbook so they can do it by themselves, and keep our time for the more challenging situation where we need to understand how markets evolve, co-evolve, and depend on each other to deliver the best benefit for the business overall. Could we get an email address from me for any other question? Of course. Yes, Oscar. We'd love to see you again. I remember you were stopping by and saying hello a few years ago. So maybe Fred, if you can, drop my email address. Yes, here it is, Lejean, EIPM.org. So, give me a little update. Always interesting. Listen, have a good day for the ones that are, on the other side of the Atlantic. And I know many of you are coming from South America today. Good evening for all the ones that are in Europe and that have been joining this session. We had Asia this morning. So thank you all. Have a great day. Bye-bye.